Well, good evening, and welcome to the February Global Read webinar. I'm Brenda Randolph, the Outreach Director at the Center for African Studies at Howard University. And just a little bit about the Global Read webinar. It is sponsored by the World Area Book Awards, which includes our award, the Children's Africana Book Award, or CABA, and also the Americas Award, which focuses on Latin America, the Freeman Book Award, which focuses on East and Southeast Asia, the Middle East Book Award, and SABA, the South Asia Book Award. Each year, the World Area Book Award sponsors 60-minute webinars that feature a presentation by an award-winning author with discussion on how to incorporate multicultural literature into the classroom. We are so excited because tonight with us is Ekiuwa Aire, the winner of the Children's Africana Best Book Award for Young Children for her picture book, Idia of the Benin Kingdom. Joining us tonight as moderator is Dr. Vanessa Oyugi, who is the co-outreach director at Howard University, and Anya Ueno, also from Howard, will be providing our technical support. Ekiuwa was born and raised in Benin City, Nigeria. She moved to England when she was 9, and it was here, away from all that she had grown up with, that she discovered her passion for writing. Ekiuwa co-wrote her first book while finishing high school and continued developing her craft while earning a Bachelor of Economics and a Master of Business Administration. She is passionate about African history and incorporates the richness of many cultures into her books. Now a mother living in Canada, Ekiuwa hopes that her books will help kids develop an appreciation for African history and to value the wisdom and pride that will come from this knowledge. And now it's my pleasure to introduce Ekiuwa Aire.
Hi, Brenda. Hi, everybody. Thank you for having me. And thank you for having me. I'm just going to, I've created a presentation to share with you all today. And without further ado, I am going to be sharing my screen. First of all, I would like to thank Africa Access and the Outreach Council of African Studies Association for giving me the opportunity to speak today at the 2022 Global Reads webinar. It is such an honor, and I'm happy to be here tonight sharing my book with you and how it relates to me being an author and researcher. Today, I will be presenting my debut title, Idia of the Benin Kingdom, which is set in Edo State in what is now Nigeria, West Africa. For me, the goal with this book was to introduce kids and, in essence, the world to this somewhat famous but little known character in African history. I think that by now, the world is coming to the realization that there is more to African history than what is generally understood. Idia's story, however, is special because Idia's face has been immortalized in a mask that is relatively mainstream. A quick Google search will show you t-shirts, pendants, artwork, jewelry, and so much more in Idia's image. And while her image is popular, her story is unknown. This is why I chose to write about Idia. We've all heard of the term putting a face to the name. With this book, I sought to put a name to the face. One of my desired outcomes was that after reading this book, readers who come across the mask, which is almost inevitable, will know and understand what it represents. So I tackled this from two angles: the manuscript, which is the story, and the illustration. With the manuscript, my approach was to read and ask as much about the Benin Kingdom and Queen Idia as I could. To do this, I looked at articles, blogs, journals, videos to learn more about Idia. With this information, I could paint a picture of the time, the location, and my main character. And I interviewed the most knowledgeable person on the topic that I know, my mother. She provided for me a valuable resource for understanding the intricacies of the culture, the language, and the setting of my story. Now I'd like to provide some more background on the setting of the story. The Kingdom of Benin was an ancient civilization going as far back as the 1200s. It was initially referred to as Igodomigodo, and it housed some amazing structures. The architecture, the arts, even its defensive walls were quite advanced. The kingdom was organized into clans or chiefdoms headed by a king called the Oba. The Oba's government was led by a council of elders who served as advisors to the king. The kingdom was well known for its artisans, also called guilds, of all types who lived and worked together and created goods for the Oba, his chiefs, and priests. At its height, the kingdom is said to have had over 68 guilds. Examples of these guilds are brass casters, carpenters, butchers, ritualists, cattle keepers, architects, blacksmiths, and sculptors. The kingdom is also said to have been a safe and prosperous land. In fact, it's said that the kingdom was so safe that its houses did not have doors. Idia. Idia's exact date of birth and death are unknown. She was likely born in the mid-1400s. Not much is written about her childhood, but we do know that as a young girl, it's written somewhere that Idia was strong-willed. She caught the eye of King Oba Ozolwa during a dance performance in the capital, and he requested for her hand in marriage. When this happened, her parents knew that because of the time and the culture, it was inevitable that she would become the Oba's wife. And to make the most of the situation, her parents began the ambitious process of strengthening her spiritually for her future in the palace. Their hope was that Idia, becoming a queen, would be a route to more power and wealth for the family. So Idia married the Oba and she became a queen. As an Oloe, which is a royal wife of the Oba, Idia became very powerful in the court. Constant references to her spiritual palace in Oba Ozolwa's palace suggest that she was well connected with many of the key players and powerful figures in the Aire. The Aire is the royal wife's residence. When Idia gave birth to her first son, Osawe, later known as Oba Esigie, the Oba actually already had a first son called Ogidogbo and a second son called Araunwa. Idia is said to have strategically switched the order of births in the royal palace by having her son Osawe's birth announced before Araunwa's. This led to Osawe becoming second in line to the throne, bringing Idia closer to power. When Ogidogbo lost Obaship rights due to a fractured leg, Idia's son Osawe became first in line to the throne. Now, it is a culture in the Benin Kingdom that when a prince became a king, his mother should immediately be put to death. This was to prevent the Oba from distractions and to safeguard the kingdom from undue manipulation. This was a problem that faced Idia after the death of her husband, Oba Ozolwa. It is believed that Idia's grave had actually been dug and that her time among the living was coming to a close. However, her son, now King Oba Esigie, had other plans. He had his mother kept in a secret location in a town called Uselu for months, while he fought to eradicate the age-old custom of killing the Oba's mother. Esigie succeeded. He created a new title for Idia called Iyoba, Queen Mother. Idia was saved from execution, but at the cost of promising never again to see her son. As time passed, Esigie became a very powerful Oba with the assistance of his mother, who constantly counseled and advised her son from afar on steps to take to improve and expand the Benin Kingdom. Idia's role in the 1515 Battle of Idia is historically significant because she dressed as a man and marched alongside her son, helping him to win the battle. In addition to her military achievements, her cultural and social accomplishments include the invention of the Ekasa dance for royal funerals. She also inspired the creation of the parrot's beak Iyoba cap. In 1550, Iyoba Idia died and left her son Esigye devastated. In honor of the woman who was more than a mother to him, Esigye commissioned royal carvers to carve masks in Idia's image. Idia's face was immortalized in the 16th century ivory masks and bronze heads that were seized by the British during the 1897 Benin invasion. Idia's mask became famous when the Nigerian military government chose it as its emblem for the Festac 77, an arts and culture festival that Nigeria hosted in 1977. When the British Museum refused to even lend the mask to Nigeria, even after the Nigerian government offered to pay a £2 million deposit, the museum became a point of controversy. Interestingly, fake copies of Idia's masks are now being produced all over the world, making her face, if not her name, known. Idia's name and role in history should never be forgotten. She was a woman of many firsts. Also, her son is said to have been one of the most enlightened princes of his time. In fact, the first known embassy established in Nigeria was in Benin during the reign of Oba Esigye. Now, Idia's story was much too complex to include, much too complex for a picture book. I actually wrote quite a few iterations of the manuscript for this book. One of my first versions chronicled all the known and written histories of Idia, focusing on her accomplishments as a wife and Iyoba. With that version of the book, I felt something was missing. And when I shared it with my own kids, I didn't receive the feedback that I was looking for. I kept tweaking, and in one of my later versions, the book evolved into a graphic novel that focused on Idia as a child searching for a purpose in the Benin Empire. While this version of the manuscript was more engaging, I found that it missed the mark in explaining Idia's true essence. As I read more and wrote more about Idia, I found myself in awe of her ambition. She was almost ruthless in her drive to ensure that her son became the king. It was almost as if she had a premonition that it was meant to be. So for me, the final version of the manuscript, for me, I decided on the final version of the manuscript that focused on her childhood, even though there isn't too much information about her childhood. I chose to imagine what her childhood may have been like and to provide answers regarding her ambition and her abilities as a woman. So the trifecta for me of Idia's talents are her dancing, her political acumen, and her spiritual powers. These three ingredients were the focus of my manuscript. So after I simplified the actual picture book, I wanted to give kids and readers the opportunity to learn more about Idia and the Benin Kingdom. So I chose to include fact pages at the end of my book to expand on facts pertaining to Idia and the Benin Kingdom. I also included a map that shows the geographical boundaries of the kingdom and how it has evolved over time. The map also serves as a nice distinction between Benin, the empire, now city, and Benin, the People's Republic of Benin, the current country, and former kingdom of Dahomey. In brainstorming on what the illustrations in the book will look like, I drew on my own experiences of living and growing up in Benin City. Growing up in Benin, I was quite immersed in the culture, the festivals, the food, and the general way of life. Cultural values in Benin determine morning greetings, food, traditional dressing, religion, and burial rites. The current city itself is small. It consists of the Oba's Palace, a museum, art galleries, Igun Street, and a uniquely placed roundabout in the center of the city called Ring Road. Every major road in the city is connected to Ring Road. The culture in Benin surrounds all who live there. Replicas of Idia's mask can be found all over the city, on t-shirts, mugs, hats, buildings. There's actually a school in Benin named after Queen Idia, and my sister attended that school. So Idia is someone that I was aware of from a very young age. And in thinking about my book's illustrations, I wanted to incorporate as much of the culture as I could to provide readers with an immersive an experience as I could in a picture book. I would be remiss to discuss this book's art without giving credit to my wonderful illustrator, Alina Shabelnyk. Alina is an illustrator who hails from Ukraine. She really loves to draw. She's extremely talented and was very, very patient during the iterative process of illustrating this book. One aspect of the illustration that I was very clear of from the beginning was the color of the ground in the region. Benin is well known for its rich red soil, also known as ulapa. This soil is often mixed with palm oil and used in constructing homes. On this page, I have some photographs of what the backdrop of the city looks like in the illustration of the book. And as you can see, we tried as much as we could to give the red sand the presence that it deserves. Now onto the architecture. The houses in the ancient Benin Empire were said to be made of the red sand mixed with palm oil, ulapa, and residents kept these walls shiny and smooth by washing and rubbing them regularly. In deciding on how to illustrate the architecture, descriptions such as the 17th century Dutch visitor Albert Dapper were what I used as a reference. He referred to the houses as built alongside the streets, one close to the other, and adorned with gables and steps with broad, long galleries inside. So I refer to descriptions such as these and images such as the ones that I have on the screen. Here are some more reference photographs on what the houses may have looked like. For these, I refer to the digital collection of the National Museum of African Art, as well as a website called Entanglements. Entanglements is a project entitled Museum Affordances, funded by the UK's Arts and Humanities Research Council. This website uses objects, photographs, sound recordings to foster a better understanding of the history and context from which these materials were gathered. These photographs were the inspiration behind the appearance of the interior and exterior wall texture. As you can see the resemblances. One of the main characters in the book is Idia's father. I have imagined Idia's father to be an elder and a warrior. I could not find actual photographs to use for reference for what a Benin warrior may have looked like. But these intricately detailed sculptures in brass give an accurate enough picture for us to base our illustrations on. The warrior chief wears a coral-studded helmet and collar, a wrap with crossed bandoliers. In many parts of the African continent, clothes were actually not necessary because of the immense heat. And at the time the events of the book happened, most kids actually did not wear clothes. In this aspect, I chose to deviate from what may have been more historically accurate and gave everyone in the book clothing. And though now Africa is well known for its attire made from bold patterned fabrics such as Ankara, those were actually only introduced to the continent in the 19th century. For everyday clothing at the time, I didn't have written sources to go by. So I used these photos from the Museum Affordances collection to gauge how everyday clothing may have looked. I noticed that the clothing in the women's, in the photographs were predominantly white wraps, And I know that cotton has been cultivated and woven in different regions of Africa for centuries. And in the pre-colonial period, cotton was cultivated to produce cloth for the household and for trading. And in addition to the red sand that is predominant in Benin, on the Benin floor, and the ground of Benin, red is also a color you will notice when you look at traditional Benin attire. Every other element in the Oba's ceremonial attire, aside from his skirt, is either made from red coral or ivory beads. And the Oba's crown and his shirt are also made from red coral beads woven into mesh. The Royal Guild wore and still wear a pure white attire called Ieruma with round beads on their necks. They wear fabric called Ikele around their waist. And the aim of this big fabric around their waist, of having a large fabric around their waist, is to show a large waist and to create the illusion of being well-fed. The traditional hairstyle of Edo women is known as Eto Okuku. And this is a hairstyle in which coral beads are sewn into the hair to form a crown called okuku. For ceremonial clothing, the Edo women tied beautiful wrappers made from a variety of fabrics such as velvet, lace, or gorge. And this predominant color, and the predominant color of these fabrics is red. These are some of the photographs that served as inspiration for this scene. The Oba and his chief's attire have actually not changed much for hundreds of years. And so there was little need to go digging into historical archives for this. For further inspiration on the backdrop, we reference this watercolor illustration called Juju Compound by George Leclerc Egerton. This attire that is sometimes worn by Benin chiefs is a reflection of Western influence on Benin traditional attire and accessories. During the time of Esigie, the priests and missionaries who were Portuguese gave out some dresses to the Oba as relics of friendship with the Benin Kingdom. Comparing what they wear now to what the priests of the Roman Catholic church wear, you can see the resemblance. And I incorporated this dressing into the book as well. This is an image from the last page in the book. This image was important to me. On this page, the goal was to showcase Idia in all of her glory by merging some of the more famous artifacts about her. We took the ivory pendant mask, the bronze head, and a bronze casting called Urhotutu of Idia with her attendants to depict Idia going to war. The pendant mask is believed to have been produced in the early 16th century for Esigie. The mask is an idealized portrait depicting Idia with softly modeled features, including carvings to show her sacrification on her forehead. The bronze head of Idia is also a naturalistic, almost life-size female head that shows Idia with a conical hairstyle covered with open work coral bead net. The Ohoto actually shows Idia surrounded by 8 female servants. On it, she wears a peaked crown, traditionally associated with her position, as well as a cylindrical collar. We tweaked this bronze artifact to show Idia similar to the way she looks in this artifact, but instead of being surrounded by female attendants, we surrounded her with soldiers, showing her going into war. Accompanying this picture book is an activity book that gives readers an opportunity to engage even more with the Benin culture and history. I had initially planned to do a 10 or 20 page simple activity book, but I found that to cover the depth of the history and culture and Idia's story, the activity book would need to have more pages. So in this 50-page activity book, we have coloring pages that include Benin artifacts and simple mazes and puzzles based on the book. Also, when I created the books, I did not anticipate the impact that they would have as teaching resources. When Idia of the Benin Kingdom was launched, I received positive feedback from teachers and homeschoolers who were using my books in classrooms and in lessons. This was memorable for me because while my initial goal was to introduce African history to kids one household at a time, the concept and skill of doing this at a classroom level proved to be far more satisfying than I could have ever imagined. In response to the support I received from educators, I have worked with other educators to create lesson plans and study units to accompany this title. I'm also excited and honored to share that the efforts on this project have resulted in it receiving several recognitions, among which is the winner of the Best Book of Young Kids by the Children's Africana Book Awards. And that is the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Ekiuwa. Thank you so much for your presentation. I know we're thrilled to have you today, and I know that I echo the excitement of all the educators that are present today, that you wrote this wonderful children's book about Queen Idia, and we are learning more about this inspiring and this really fascinating figure in West African history, and the person behind these bronze masks that we've seen in museums all over the world.
Yes.
So what we'll do now is open up for a Q&A. Everybody can have a chance to actually type in your question. So use the chat, please, to type in the questions that you have, and we'll also give you the opportunity to unmute yourself and actually share your video and ask your question. So let us first say thank you, Ekiuwa, for your amazing presentation. And I will begin with one question. I've heard you mention before that your mother inspired or influenced your writing of Idia. Could you speak on that?
My mother, she helped with the research. She knew a lot of the story. She knew a lot of the facts behind the story that I couldn't find in the written work online. I always wondered why was she the first Iyoba? Why her? Why weren't there Iyobas before her? And it was my mother that broke it down and told me that, well, before then there was a practice of killing the Oba's mother. And she was the first one that told me that. Also, the language is something that unfortunately I do not speak, but I wanted to introduce the language in my book because I think that is part of the culture. So I relied heavily on my mother to give me direction on how to use the words correctly in the books.
Well, thank you, Mama Ekiuwa, for helping with this book. And could you tell us a little bit more about the organization that you founded? It's called Our Ancestries.
Yes.
And tell us what moved you to create it.
I think what moved me to create it was the reception that I received when I created the book. And the reception was so positive, and I realized that there is a need for the books that I am creating. I would say that when I initially started writing Idia of the Benin Kingdom, I didn't think I would write more than one book. I thought I would write just this book about someone who was from my culture, and that would be the end of it. But with the feedback that I received, I knew that there was more to this, and I shouldn't just limit it to my culture. That would really be unfair. And I should go and figure out how to do what I had done for Idia, but for other characters in African history. And so with Our Ancestries, the goal is to write more about African history and characters in African history, and to make them mainstream and to not make them as niche as they currently are, and to use African history and African characters in powerful storytelling and in beautifully created books.
That's wonderful. And in doing this, have you found a community of maybe authors and illustrators who focus on historical biographies?
Yes. Yes, I have. And what I found is that I'm not sure why, but I appear to have received more visibility than some of the other historians or the other people that are passionate about African history. And I am receiving a lot of requests for collaboration. Let's write on this. Let's do this. This is so exciting. There's so much we can do with this history, because with African history, once you get started, it is really so deep. And there is a whole community of historians out there who are itching to get their stories told, who are extremely passionate about African history, who do not understand why the whole world is not as passionate as they are. And I'm looking forward to seeing what I'll be creating with these people in the future.
Well, exciting. These are exciting future projects that we're waiting to hear about. We have folks here from Brazil, I see. Maria says, thank you for this amazing book. I wish I could have mine here in Brazil. How can she order this book?
I think it's available on Amazon, and she could order it on Amazon in Brazil. I don't know of any bookstores in Brazil that currently carry the book.
Okay. I see Leela Hamilton says, very interesting. Can't wait to read it. Where can she start if she wanted to learn more about Benin history?
I think this book is a good start. I can send some articles to you that you could read. I can't think of any of them right off the top of my head, but I can send some to you after the call.
Okay, great. Actually, Maria, was somebody who would like to actually unmute themselves and say and ask the question? I have a very interesting question from Maria here about providing this book in other languages.
Yes.
Do you have some plans?
Yeah, so that's a whole project for me. And so initially when I had written these books, the goal was to, first of all, translate them into French. And then after French, figure out where else to translate them. And I was even looking for French translators. And then I sat down and I said, why would I translate to French when the language that is the culture is the Benin people? First, I should translate it into Benin. And so I think that the translation of this book is going to be a big project. I am ambitiously thinking of, in one go, translating the books into about 20 different languages, because I think everybody all over the world should be able to read this book, languages in Africa as well as European languages. That is the goal.
Exciting. And Brenda Randolph asks about the self-publishing process. Did you have any troubles and challenges in the process of self-publishing this book?
Yes, self-publishing itself is an uphill battle. It's not easy to do, but it is doable. And there is research out there on how to do things properly and how to get it done eventually. So I would say that self-publishing it's easier to have a traditional publisher and to write the book. But with self-publishing, I find it to be fulfilling to be able to own the entire narrative of the book from beginning to the end. I was able to determine exactly how I wanted my book printed. I'm very happy with the print quality of my books, because not only did I want to be able to tell the stories, to give African history good storytelling, I also wanted to create actually beautiful physical books based off of African history. And that was one of the reasons I decided to self-publish, so that I could choose my own illustrators, choose my own printers, and choose exactly how I wanted my book to be marketed.
Great. And so the process of interacting with your illustrator, was it very useful that you were able to actually reach out and discuss this process? And
yes.
Yes. Can you speak on that?
Yes, it was useful. It was great that I knew who she was, and that I, the writer, was able to sort of dictate what I wanted the visual on the book to look like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is, as I hear, quite rare. And if you're not self-publishing, that you're able to work as closely with the illustrator as you have. And we have actually met your illustrator, and she's working on other projects too, right? That are also historical biographies that are coming out as well.
Yes, she's booked and busy.
She's booked and busy. What was, when you were researching, when you in the research process, what was it like for one? And did you encounter any challenges? Did you find something interesting that you did not expect to find?
I think one of the challenges that I found, which is a little odd, not really odd, but it's a little quirk, is that in researching the Benin Kingdom, it's finding the truth was really tough, because not only is the truth of our history somewhat biased, whatever was written is written with a bias. Also, for the Benin Kingdom in particular, there is so much confusion between the Kingdom of Dahomey and the Benin Kingdom. And so I had to really make sure that the images that I'm looking at as reference, is this really the Kingdom of Benin and not the Dahomey Kingdom? So that was one of the challenges that I faced in researching for this book.
Thank you. Is anybody, yes, actually, as you're researching about the Benin Kingdom, what have you found, or what can you tell us about the walls of Benin City? That might be one of the things that students might encounter if they start to do some research on Benin Kingdom. What can you tell us about the walls of Benin City?
The walls of Benin, I think, they were built over hundreds of years, and they surrounded the entire kingdom. They were built pretty similar to the way the Egyptians built their pyramids. A king would dedicate manpower, resources to building these walls to protect the kingdom, and only certain people were allowed through the walls. The walls were at one point said to be longer than the walls of China, and the walls were destroyed during the 1897 expedition, in 1897 Benin invasion. Some parts of the walls of the Benin Kingdom are still standing today, but it is unfortunately in great disrepair.
Mm-hmm. I see, Dr. Cham, you have your hand up. Would you like to join in the conversation and ask Ekiuwa a question?
Yes, I'm trying to unmute myself here.
There we see you. We see you.
Hi, what a wonderful book and presentation. I'm looking forward to definitely reading it. A quick question here. Is there any plan to maybe adapt it into some kind of an animation movie? I ask this question because interestingly enough, there's a Nigerian film that was made in 1979 by Eddie Ugboma entitled The Mask. And it was actually based on the story of Queen Idia, and it sort of coincided also with the moment that you talked about, where Festac was trying to retrieve from the British Museum this artifact that was stolen in 1897 after that raid there. And Eddie Ugboma had the idea of, when the British refused, he had the idea of showing the Nigerians exactly how to go about, raiding the British Museum and retrieving this this very vital heritage and treasure, So he came out with this film entitled The Mask, which I guess was quite successful at the time there. So I was just wondering if there's sort of any plans on your side to maybe expand it into another medium genre.
I would love to, and I would welcome such an idea. However, though self-publishing a book is something, though an uphill battle, I did it by myself. I don't know that on my own I would be able to animate this book. If anyone were to come to me with a proposal for animating the book with me or collaborating with me, I would definitely be up for that and be excited about that. Yes, I don't even know how to go about it. I would put it out there to the university. If you're interested, you send me an email. I would be interested in doing that.
Thank you.
Great. Cassandra Butler, would you like to unmute yourself and ask your question? Or maybe she might have logged off. She asked, did you or Howard University have anything to do with the Smithsonian pulling a Benin exhibit that they were planning to install?
Can you repeat that question, please?
Sure. She says, first of all, thank you for this fascinating story. And then she asks if you or Howard University had anything to do with the Smithsonian pulling a Benin exhibit that they were planning to install. So they must have pulled an exhibit that was supposed to be on installation.
No, I don't think it was us, but the whole world is currently looking at the Benin bronzes and looking at art that has been taken from Africa and is included in museums all over the world right now. And there's a big push to return all of this art back to their rightful locations. And I think similar to the way the world sensibilities change, museums, people that are going to museums are beginning to ask questions about what they're looking at and if these artifacts really should be halfway across the world and not in the locations where they were created. And so I think museums that are at an interesting point in time. It'll be interesting to see how everything lands.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Cameron Adams, would you like to ask your question? Cameron Adams, you can feel free to unmute yourself. Well, Cameron asks or says that you mentioned that growing up in Benin, you knew quite a bit about the story of Idia. Did you receive that information only through relatives or the stories such as this one discussed or taught to children in the education system in Benin? Is this taught in schools in Benin?
Yeah, so I had a debate with my friends regarding this. Some of my friends actually had Idia taught formally in school. I did not. I knew of her. Maybe I don't remember how it was given to me, how the information was given to me. I knew of her, but I would say that 90% of my knowledge of Idia came with writing this book. And even grown-up adults, my relatives who read this book, they say, oh, really? Is this her story? So I think Idia is someone, even in the culture, even in Benin, where she lived, the exact details around what she stood for, who she was, is beginning to get a little fuzzy. She has become more of a ceremonial name, and what she really was isn't something that is common knowledge.
Mm-hmm. And something more tangible that you mentioned in the book is that she inspired a dance. Was it a casa dance?
Casa dance, yes.
Is that still being practiced, and is there a spiritual significance behind that dance?
Because she was a dancer, so she created this dance routine, and the dance routine is still being used to this day in royal funerals.
In funerals?
Yes.
That's very fascinating. Thank you. And one other aspect of this, because we might have quite a few educators that are present today, and some of them being actually students at Howard University, Dr. Bond's students. We have Dr. Bond here we work with closely. I see some faces turning up. What are some of your favorite resources, teaching resources that are on your website? And what are some of the research projects that you suggest that could kind of jump off from an initial reading on Idia and the Benin Kingdom that can spring off from initial research?
I think just reading the book or reading any other books on Africa and its culture is a very good place to start. And from there, conversations are being had. I think one of the reasons that I was one of the first to write on African history in this way is because there is this belief that African history is too heavy for kids. And so African history is typically not introduced to kids until they get to high school. And at that point, there isn't enough of a base there to build an interest. And people, unless you're really fascinated with it for some reason, you wouldn't be interested in the history, and the history is dying. And so the way that I think of what I'm doing is that I am introducing to kids the equivalent of 2+2. My books do not tell you everything about Idia. Like I just shared with you, all of the facts that I just shared with you in my slides are not all mentioned in my books because my books were very simple. They're 2+2. They're just introducing kids to the fact that there once was a person called Idia who looks like you or who did not look like you. And there was an Ijinga once, there was a Moremi once. And later on, once they get to high school, if they see a subject on African history or university, they're more likely to take on that subject because they have a base, they have a memory on that character. So I think the first, for younger kids, the goal would just be to introduce them to these characters using books in a simple way, nothing too complicated, make it as simple and as fun as possible. We don't want them reciting facts and dates and memorizing names, and that's not always fun. So that was why in my activity books, I focused more on coloring pages, puzzles, just instilling with them a sense of having fun with this history. Though it's not a fun history, with kids, you kind of have to make everything fun. So that's the answer to that question.
And where can they find the lesson plans? And I see you had study units.
Yes, they're on my website, our-ancestries.com.
Great. Pauline Johnson, I think you had a question. I see there's some more educators here. I don't see any hands up, but do any of the educators have some questions for Ekiuwa?
I do. Really enjoyed your presentation. I have a question regarding, it's certainly great storytelling, but how can, and I think there's really a lot of substance there. I think it's a little bit more than 2+2, but how can you use it at that level to maybe dispel some common stereotypes that people have around people of color here in the US as well as in Africa?
I think that the way to use it to dispel stereotypes is that you're telling kids, and all kids, not just kids of African descent, that there were leaders, there were smart people, there were human beings in Africa even before colonization happened. And so one of the stereotypes about Africa is that it has no history, or that colonization brought more good than bad to Africa. In telling the history of before colonization happened, you're teaching kids while they're in their formative years that these people had something going on for them even before the Westerners came. And that's a big stereotype to dispel.
I agree. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Bond. Thank you. Can you tell us a little bit what role that the Oba plays today in today's society, and the Yoruba? What roles do they play in present day society?
So Nigeria has a unique government system. So when it was colonized, they introduced the presidents and the heads of states and so on. But we still have, in a few tribes, we still have the traditional heads, and they still have some sort of power. They don't have governmental power, but they still control the people. In Benin, in particular, the Edo people are very proud of their heritage. And so they are one of the fewer tribes in Nigeria that still hold the Oba to high esteem. So he's still in his palace, the same palace that was there 500 years ago. He still has some say over the people. He still performs traditional rites. We still have the Igwe festival that's featured in this book. It is still being celebrated to this day. So he's still there, more of a spiritual and figurehead. But I think that a lot of people still give him due reverence and respect.
Thank you. Laura Ellis has her hand up. You can unmute yourself.
Good evening. I really appreciated your presentation. I'm a high school media specialist, but I spent years as an elementary media specialist in schools. One of the things I've always liked is when I have a great book, I have, a toy with it. Like I have all kind of stuffed animals. Like I have the caterpillar from a recently deceased Mr. I can't think of his name right now, who's the very hungry Eric Carle. So I have all kind of in my personal collection. If your book continues to be as successful and well received as it is, and I love that it has a coloring book, do you envision having a doll to go with your book? Because I think that would be great. And I collect dolls too. I just got a doll. I just got the Ida B. Wells Barbie. So you don't have to be a kid to love great books and the toys that go with them. So just your thoughts about that.
Yes, I have plans for those. I have plans for dolls. I currently have T-shirts that are doing well, but I do have plans. It's just the logistics regarding how to get them here, store them, ship them. I work with a distributor currently, and whenever I think about the dolls, I wonder if she would help me ship the dolls as well. So I'm in my mind, I'm wondering how to implement it in real life. It's something I would love to do. I might do it for a one-time project. Maybe I have this big event in one day and I'm going to, I could have the dolls made for that. That's one of the ways I've thought about going about it.
Well, I would just love it if you were on, when the libraries have their big events, a lot of times that's where I got the American doll. So I have Addie, the American doll, and I have all her furniture. I have all of that stuff. So I wish you the best and congratulations. And just take your time and do you, because it's wonderful.
Oh, thank you.
Take your time. Don't rush. Do what's right for you. Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for that, Laura. Yeah, a doll would be wonderful. I see that somebody in the chat said that they have a Mansa Musa doll.
Yeah, I need to go look for that.
That is quite exciting, Marie. If you have anything to tell us about that, please feel free to share. Well, thank you so much. And what other projects do we have? Are we excited to hear about for your future?
I'm working on 2 books on male characters. Like the speaker just said, I am taking my time with those. There's a lot of research that is going into those books. One of the characters hails from Mali, Sunjata of the Manding Empire. And another one of the characters in that I'm working on was not a king or a warrior. So it's my first ordinary person who eventually became a god, Imhotep of the ancient Kemet. So those are the 2 books that I'm working on. I'm hoping that they would be released later this year or early next year.
Great. Are these any collaborations with some other authors, or are you working on them?
Those I'm working on my own.
And we can find out more about these on your website?
Oh, yes, you can. They're not ready. I'm still working on them. The illustrations are still being done. Alina is working on the Sunjata illustration. Yes, and I have another illustrator working on the Imhotep illustration. They're still a work in progress, and we're taking our time with those books.
Please do. We're excited to see more of these projects, especially these historical biographies that are always hard to put your hands on, especially for young people. So we're
another
very
one
excited.
Another one of the collaborations that I'm working on this is one of the collaborators. They approached me about the Maasai tribe in Kenya and in Tanzania. And they're this one of the tribes, the more untouched tribes, they still, their daily lives is still representative of what they lived 500 years ago. And they don't have any books about them or about their tribe or their culture. So I would be looking to create a book for the Maasai tribe that's written in English and in their language. That's another project that I'm working on that I'm excited about.
Yes. Venturing out all over the continent.
Yes, and that's not based on history. It's be more everyday life of an African culture, which is exciting.
Very exciting. The website for Ekiuwa's Ekiuwa's website is ourancestries.com. Thank you, Anya, for sharing. Someone says an entire series would be great. Yes, kids love series. What are you thinking about that?
Yes, the book one would be written as just one book, but it would be written in a way that it could spin into a series if it does well. I'm thinking about making it a series. And the proceeds from that book would also go towards helping the tribe with funding as well. So that's another thing I'm excited about.
That is wonderful. Well, I think our time is up, everybody. Thank you so much, Ekiuwa, for this wonderful presentation and for engaging us in the Q&A. Thank you all the educators that took part. Thank you for being here with us today. We would like to say that this is part of a series, the Global Reads webinar series. And the next one in line is actually hosted by the South Asia Book Award. And that's going to be on March 22nd. And it features a book, 1,000 Questions by Sadia Faruqi. And if you would like to register for that, please go to internationalizingsocialstudies.blog. And we look forward to more projects and more presentations from you, more work with you. Thank you, everybody, for joining. Thank you, Ekiuwa. This was wonderful.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you. I am honored. Have a lovely